At my grandson's birthday lunch, my daughter said, "It's better if you don't overdo your presents. You always want to be the center of attention." But when he opened the album I made with every stage of his childhood, he wouldn't leave my side. "Your presence here means so much to me. Watch until the end and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has reached." I stood in front of my daughter's house, clutching the carefully wrapped photo album to my chest. My heart was racing with anticipation. It was Tommy's 8th birthday, and despite the tension between Caroline and me, I couldn't miss my only grandson's special day. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The sound of children laughing inside made me smile. A moment later, the door swung open, and Caroline's face fell the instant she saw me. "Mom, you're early," she said, her voice flat. "I wanted to help set up," I offered, trying to keep my tone light. Caroline sighed. "Better not exaggerate your presence. You always want to be the center of attention." Her words stung like tiny needles in my heart, but I forced a smile. "I just want to see Tommy." She stepped aside reluctantly, and I walked into a house bustling with birthday chaos. Colorful balloons floated against the ceiling, and a "Happy Birthday Tommy" banner hung across the living room. My grandson was in the backyard with other children, engaged in some game involving water balloons. "Grandma!" Tommy spotted me through the window and ran inside, his clothes damp and his smile wide. He threw his arms around my waist, and for a moment nothing else mattered. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, hugging him back. "I have something special for you." Robert, my son-in-law, nodded curtly from across the room. He'd never been openly hostile, but his loyalty to Caroline meant keeping me at arm's length. Still, he was cordial enough to offer me a cup of punch. As other guests arrived, I found myself gradually pushed to the periphery of the celebration. Caroline kept throwing glances my way, as if monitoring my every move. I sat quietly in a corner, watching Tommy enjoy his party, trying to stay out of Caroline's way. When it came time for gifts, Tommy tore through wrapping paper with gleeful abandon. New video games, action figures, and clothes piled up beside him. Finally, he reached mine. "What's this, Grandma?" he asked, carefully unwrapping the package. "Open it and see," I encouraged. Inside was a leather-bound photo album I'd spent months creating. It contained photos of Tommy from the day he was born until now, carefully arranged with handwritten captions detailing each milestone. "Wow!" Tommy exclaimed, flipping through the pages. "Look, Mom. It's me when I was a baby. And here's when I lost my first tooth." Caroline glanced at the album, her expression tightening. But Tommy was enchanted. He climbed onto my lap, the album open between us, asking questions about each photo. "Where did you get all these pictures?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Your mom shared some, and I took others when I visited," I explained gently. Caroline approached, her eyes narrowed. "Tommy, why don't you show your friends your new bike outside?" Tommy didn't budge. "But Grandma's showing me pictures of when I was little." "Now, Tommy," Caroline insisted, her voice strained. As Tommy reluctantly slid off my lap, Caroline leaned close to me, whispering, "Did you have to upstage everyone else's gifts? This is exactly what I was talking about." I didn't mean to. I started, but she cut me off. "You never do, Mom. You never mean to, but somehow you always make everything about you." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "Caroline, that's not fair. Isn't it?" She straightened up, raising her voice just enough that nearby guests turned to look. "You weren't there when I needed you growing up, but now you want to play perfect grandma? Where was this dedication when I was a child?" The room fell silent. I felt eyes on me from every direction, judging, wondering. My face burned with humiliation. Tommy stood frozen, the album clutched in his small hands, his eyes wide with confusion. Robert finally stepped in, placing a hand on Caroline's arm. "Cake time," he announced loudly, steering my daughter toward the kitchen. I sat there, shaking, as the party awkwardly resumed around me. Tommy approached hesitantly, placing the album in my hands. "Are you okay, Grandma?" he whispered. I forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Go enjoy your party." But I wasn't fine. Caroline's words had ripped open old wounds, exposing a pain I thought I'd buried long ago. As I watched her light the candles on Tommy's cake, her face illuminated by the warm glow, I wondered how we had drifted so far apart. How had my little girl grown into a woman who could barely stand my presence? Quietly, I gathered my purse and slipped out the front door. Nobody noticed my departure. Nobody except Tommy, whose eyes caught mine as I closed the door behind me. The album remained on the chair where I had been sitting, my heart bound in leather, left behind for my grandson to find. The drive home from Tommy's party was a blur. Tears clouded my vision as I navigated familiar streets on autopilot. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my chest ached from trying to hold back sobs. Inside my small house, I collapsed onto the sofa, finally allowing grief to wash over me. Caroline's words echoed in my mind. "You weren't there when I needed you growing up." Was that really how she remembered her childhood? Had I failed her so completely? I closed my eyes and memories flooded back, ones Caroline seemed to have forgotten or chosen to ignore. It hadn't always been this way. Before David died, we were happy. Caroline was 12 when cancer took her father, leaving me a widow at 39 with a heartbroken daughter and a mortgage I couldn't afford on my teacher's salary alone. I remember the night I sat at our kitchen table, bills spread out before me, realizing one income wouldn't be enough. Caroline found me there, still in my robe at midnight, calculator in hand, tears streaming down my face. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" she'd asked, her young voice trembling. "Yes, sweetheart," I promised. "I'll make sure of it." The next day, I applied for a second job as a night receptionist at the local hospital. It wasn't ideal. Working days at the elementary school and evenings at the hospital meant less time with Caroline. But it kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. I arranged for Mrs. Hanson next door to check on Caroline in the evenings. I'd call between shifts, exhausted but determined to hear about her day. I'd leave notes in her lunchbox, prepare meals in advance, and spend every Sunday, my only day off, doing something special with her. But it wasn't enough. Not for a grieving teenager who needed her mother present. I missed her first school dance because I couldn't get the night off. I arrived late to her debate competition, slipping into the back row just as her team accepted the second-place trophy. Each time, Caroline's eyes would search the crowd for me, and each time I wasn't where I promised to be, a little piece of her trust in me died. By 16, Caroline had withdrawn completely. She stopped sharing her day, stopped calling me at work, stopped waiting up for me to come home. Notes I left went unread. Sunday outings were rejected in favor of time with friends. "You're never here anyway," she'd say, shrugging off my attempts to connect. "Why start now?" Caroline met Robert during her first year of college. He was 5 years older, already established in his career as an accountant. From the beginning, I sensed something off about him. The way he always spoke for Caroline, the way her vibrant personality seemed to dim in his presence. "He takes care of me," Caroline told me defiantly when I expressed concern. Unlike some people. The barb landed exactly as she intended. I backed off, afraid of pushing her further away. They married a year later. Caroline was just 20. I wanted to tell her she was rushing, that she had her whole life ahead of her, but the words died in my throat. What right did I have to give advice about being present when I'd been physically absent for so much of her adolescence? After the wedding, Robert systematically isolated Caroline from what remained of our relationship. They moved an hour away. Phone calls became less frequent. Visits were always at their convenience, always brief, always tense. When Tommy was born, I thought things might change. I retired from both jobs, finally financially secure enough to live on my pension and savings. I had time now. Time I'd never had when Caroline was growing up. I was ready to be the devoted grandmother I couldn't be as a mother. But by then, the narrative had been written. I was the absent mother who prioritized work over family. The fact that my choice had kept us from homelessness was irrelevant in the story Caroline and Robert had constructed. I tried to explain once, during one of my rare visits after Tommy's birth. "Caroline, I know I wasn't always there," I began carefully, watching her rock my newborn grandson. "But everything I did was for us, for our survival." She looked up, her eyes cold. "We needed more than survival, Mom. We needed you." I wrote letters after that. Long, heartfelt explanations of those difficult years, apologies for the moments I missed, assurances that my love had never wavered despite my absence. I poured my soul onto pages Caroline never acknowledged receiving. A knock at my door jolted me back to the present. My heart leaped. Could it be Caroline? Had she followed me home to apologize? But when I opened the door, it was just my neighbor returning a borrowed garden tool. That night, I pulled out the shoebox where I kept carbon copies of all the letters I'd sent Caroline over the years. Letters full of explanations, apologies, and love that apparently fell on deaf ears. As I read through them, I wondered if she'd ever actually read any of them or if Robert had intercepted them. I reached for my phone, composing a text I knew would probably go unanswered. "I love you, Caroline. I always have, even when I couldn't be there. The album is for Tommy. Let him keep it, please." After sending it, I sat in the quiet of my living room, surrounded by mementos of a life that seemed to exist only in my memory. A life where my sacrifices were made out of love, not neglect. 3 weeks passed since Tommy's birthday disaster. My text to Caroline remained unanswered, joining the growing collection of ignored attempts at reconciliation. I tried to keep busy, volunteering at the community garden, attending my book club, anything to fill the hollow ache in my chest. On Wednesday afternoon, I was deadheading roses in my front yard when the phone rang. Pulling off my gardening gloves, I hurried inside, assuming it was my doctor's office confirming an appointment. "Hello," I answered, slightly out of breath. "Grandma." A small, uncertain voice came through the line. My heart stopped. "Tommy, is that you?" "Yeah." He sounded nervous. "I'm using Dad's phone while he's in the shower." I sank into a chair, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "It's so good to hear your voice, sweetheart. How are you?" "I'm okay." There was a pause. "I miss you, Grandma. Mom took away the photo album after you left, but Dad found it and gave it back to me. I keep it under my bed." Tears welled in my eyes. "I miss you too, Tommy. More than you know. Can I come see you?" he asked suddenly. Dad said maybe, but Mom doesn't know I asked. I hesitated, torn between my desperate desire to see my grandson and fear of angering Caroline further. "Sweetheart, I'd love that, but we should probably make sure your mom is okay with it first." "She won't be," Tommy said with the blunt honesty of an 8-year-old. "She and Dad have been fighting a lot. About you sometimes. But mostly about everything." This revelation sent a chill through me. "Fighting? What do you mean?" Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. "Dad sleeps in the guest room now. Mom cries a lot when she thinks I can't hear. Yesterday, Dad said Mom needs help, but she threw a plate at the wall." My mind raced. Caroline and Robert's marriage had always seemed perfect on the surface. Controlling as Robert was, I'd never seen signs of serious discord between them. What was happening in my daughter's home? "Tommy, is your dad taking good care of you?" I asked carefully. "Yeah. He makes dinner now and takes me to school. Mom stays in bed a lot." He paused. "Dad said Mom is sad like he was when his mom died, but Mom's mom isn't dead." "You're right here." The innocent observation pierced my heart. Caroline was suffering, and in her pain, she was pushing away the people who loved her, including her own son. "Tommy, where is your dad taking you on Saturday?" I asked, an idea forming. "Soccer practice in the morning." "Why?" "Ask him if he could bring you to visit me afterward. Just for a little while." The excitement in Tommy's voice was palpable. "Really? I'll ask him right now." "Wait, Tommy." But he had already put the phone down. I heard muffled voices in the background. Then Tommy returned, practically bursting with enthusiasm. "Dad said yes. We can come at noon on Saturday." Relief and anxiety battled within me. That's wonderful, sweetheart. But Tommy, does your dad think your mom will be upset? There was a moment of silence. Dad says it's time Mom remembered some important things. After saying goodbye to Tommy, I sat for a long time, processing the unexpected turn of events. Caroline was struggling, her marriage apparently in trouble. And Robert, who I'd always seen as the wedge between my daughter and me, was now facilitating a connection with my grandson. I spent the next 3 days preparing for Tommy's visit. I baked his favorite chocolate chip cookies, bought art supplies for the craft projects he loved, and set up the spare bedroom, just in case. When Saturday arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. At precisely noon, a car pulled into my driveway. Tommy bounded out before Robert had even turned off the engine, racing up my front walk. "Grandma!" he shouted, flinging himself into my arms. I hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling the solid warmth of him against me. "I've missed you so much," I whispered. Robert approached more slowly, his expression unreadable. Up close, I could see the dark circles under his eyes, the strain around his mouth. "Thank you for bringing him," I said cautiously. Robert nodded. "He needs this. And frankly, so do you." He glanced at his watch. "I have errands to run. I'll pick him up at 3. As Robert's car disappeared down the street, Tommy tugged at my hand. "Can we look at the album together? There are pictures I don't remember." Inside, we settled on the couch with the album between us. Tommy turned the pages reverently, asking questions about each photo. I told him stories about his early years. His first steps, first words, the way he'd laugh at peekaboo. "Why does Mom get mad when I talk about you?" he asked suddenly, looking up with earnest eyes. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes people get hurt in ways that are hard to explain. And that hurt can make them push away the people they love. "Is Mom hurt?" "I think so, honey. Sometimes when people are hurting, they don't know how to ask for help." Tommy considered this, his small face serious. "Dad says Mom is scared." "Scared of what, sweetheart?" I shrugged. "I don't know. But he says that's why she's so angry all the time." As the afternoon progressed, Tommy and I baked cookies, worked on a model airplane, and played board games. For a few precious hours, the weight of estrangement lifted from my shoulders. When Robert returned, Tommy was reluctant to leave. "Can I come back tomorrow?" Robert and I exchanged looks. "We'll see, buddy," he said gently. "Go wait in the car for a minute. I need to talk to your grandmother." Once Tommy was out of earshot, Robert turned to me. "Caroline doesn't know they were here. This could backfire spectacularly." "Why did you bring him then?" "Yes." Robert ran a hand through his hair. "Because Caroline isn't the only one affected by this feud. Tommy needs his grandmother." He paused. "And because Caroline needs help I can't give her." I was repotting my favorite orchid when the doorbell rang. 3 days had passed since Tommy's visit, and each hour since had been filled with a mixture of joy from the memory and anxiety about the potential fallout. When I opened the door, Caroline stood on my porch, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed with red. She'd been crying. "May I come in?" Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the tremor beneath. I stepped aside wordlessly, heart hammering against my ribs. Caroline entered, her gaze sweeping across the living room, lingering on the framed photos of her and Tommy that lined my walls. "Robert told me yesterday," she said without preamble, turning to face me, "about bringing Tommy here." I took a steadying breath. "Caroline, do you have any idea what it felt like?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "Finding out my husband and son have been lying to me? That they went behind my back to see you?" "I'm sorry you found out that way," I said carefully. "But I'm not sorry I saw Tommy." Caroline laughed bitterly. "Of course you're not. You've always done exactly what you wanted, regardless of how it affected anyone else." The accusation stung, so similar to the one she'd hurled at Tommy's party. But this time, standing in my own home, I refused to retreat. That's not true and you know it, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Everything I've ever done has been with you in mind. Like working so much I barely saw you. Like missing every important moment of my childhood. Yes, I exclaimed, surprising us both with my vehemence. Yes, Caroline. Like working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads after your father died. Like making sure you had food, clothes, and could go to college without debt. Caroline rolled her eyes. Here we go again. Poor martyred mom. Sacrificing everything for ungrateful me. That's not what I'm saying. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I made mistakes, Caroline. I know that. There were times you needed me and I wasn't there. But it wasn't because I didn't care or didn't want to be there. Then why? She demanded, tears welling in her eyes. Because I was terrified. The words burst from me, raw and honest. I was terrified of failing you, of not being enough. Your father was gone, and suddenly I was solely responsible for this beautiful, grieving girl. I was drowning in bills and responsibilities, and yes, I missed things I shouldn't have. But never, not once, was it because you weren't the most important person in my world. Caroline's stance softened slightly, uncertainty flashing across her face before she steeled herself again. You could have found another way. What way, Caroline? Tell me, what magical solution did I miss? My voice cracked with emotion. Should I have let the bank take our house? Should we have gone on welfare? Moved in with your grandparents who barely had room for themselves? She didn't answer. I wrote you letters, I continued more softly. For years I wrote explaining everything. Did you ever read them? Caroline looked away. Robert said they were just more excuses. Anger flared in my chest. So you never read them. You let your husband decide what your mother could say to you. Don't blame Robert for this, she snapped, but there was less conviction in her voice. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just asking you to listen. Really listen to what I'm trying to tell you. I moved to a drawer in the side table, pulling out a bundle of carbon copies tied with blue ribbon. These are copies of every letter I wrote you. Read them, Caroline. Please. She stared at the bundle, making no move to take it. Tommy said you've been having a hard time, I said gently. That you and Robert are struggling. Caroline's face crumpled. He had no right to tell you that. He's 8, sweetheart. He's scared and confused. I stepped closer. What's happening? For a moment I thought she would flee. But then, like a dam breaking, words poured out of her. Everything's falling apart, she whispered. Robert lost his job 3 months ago. He didn't tell me for weeks. Just left every morning pretending to go to work. We're behind on the mortgage. He's talking about selling the house, moving to his parents in Ohio. She looked up at me, eyes brimming. I can't uproot Tommy. And I can't go back to living under someone else's roof, following someone else's rules. The irony wasn't lost on me. Caroline, who had accused me of abandoning her by working too much, was now facing a similar financial crisis. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. Because you'd say exactly what you're thinking right now, that I'm finally getting a taste of my own medicine. She wiped angrily at her tears. That I'm a hypocrite. I shook my head, moving to sit beside her on the couch. No, Caroline. What I'm thinking is that I would do anything to spare you this pain. Just like I would have done anything to spare you from losing your father. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the wall of resentment she'd built around her heart. I never wanted to be away from you, I continued. Every minute I spent working I was thinking of you. Every school play I missed, every parent-teacher conference I was late for. I hated myself for it. But I did what I had to do to keep us afloat. Caroline stared at the bundle of letters in my hands. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached for them. Robert hasn't been sleeping in our room, she admitted quietly. He says I've become bitter, angry all the time. That I'm obsessed with a past I can't change. And what do you think? Yes. She looked at me fully for the first time since entering my house. I think I've been so busy being angry at you for not being there that I haven't noticed I'm not really there for Tommy either. The letters sat untouched on Caroline's coffee table for 2 weeks. After our confrontation, she'd taken them home, but whether she'd read them remained a mystery. Our conversation had ended with an uneasy truce. No warm reconciliation, but a crack in the wall between us. Caroline had allowed me to see Tommy once, a supervised visit at a neutral location, the park near their home. We'd spent an awkward hour together, Caroline watching from a bench while Tommy and I fed ducks at the pond. It wasn't much, but it was something. Beginning. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just after 11 when frantic knocking jolted me from sleep. I grabbed my robe, heart pounding as I hurried to the door. Through the peephole I saw Caroline, Tommy half asleep in her arms, rain soaking them both. I threw the door open. "Caroline, what's happened?" She stood trembling on my porch, mascara streaking down her pale cheeks. "Can we come in? Please?" I ushered them inside, taking Tommy from her arms. The boy stirred briefly, murmuring "Grandma," before nestling against my shoulder. "He's exhausted," Caroline whispered, pushing wet hair from her face. "We've been driving for hours." I led them to the living room, gently laying Tommy on the couch and covering him with a throw blanket. He curled onto his side, thumb creeping toward his mouth in a gesture I hadn't seen since he was a toddler. "I'll make tea," I said, keeping my voice even despite the alarm rising within me. "Then you can tell me what's going on." In the kitchen, I filled the kettle with shaking hands. Caroline followed me, collapsing into a chair at the small table. In the harsh fluorescent light, I could see a bruise forming along her jawline. "Did Robert do that to you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. Caroline touched her face, wincing. "Not directly. He threw a glass against the wall. A piece hit me." She looked up, seeing the horror in my expression. "It wasn't aimed at me." "He's never been physically violent, Mom." I set mugs of tea before us, sitting across from her. "Start from the beginning." Caroline wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "It's been building for months. The job loss, the money problems. Robert's been drinking more. Tonight he came home late, drunk. He wants us to move to Ohio next week. His parents have a place for us above their garage. And you don't want to go." She shook her head. "It's not just that. Everything. The letters." Her voice caught. "I read them, Mom. All of them. And then I found my old diaries from after Dad died. I held my breath, waiting. I wrote about how hard you were working. How tired you always looked." She stared into her tea. "I was angry that you weren't there, but I understood why. I knew you were doing it for us." "Then what changed?" I asked softly. Caroline's eyes met mine, filled with a pain so raw it made my chest ache. "Robert. When we started dating, I told him how much I missed you growing up. How I wished you'd been there for my school events, my first heartbreak, all those moments." She took a shuddering breath. "He twisted it. Said you'd chosen work over me. That a real mother would have found another way. He kept pointing out everything you missed, every mistake you made, until I started seeing our entire history through his eyes. A cold realization washed over me. He isolated you. From me, from your friends. From myself," Caroline whispered. "I became the bitter, angry person he told me I should be. But reading those letters, seeing your side of things." She covered her face with her hands. "I've been so unfair to you." I reached across the table, gently pulling her hands away. "We can talk about all that later. Right now, I need to know what happened tonight." Caroline's face hardened. "I told Robert the first wouldn't go to Ohio. That I was thinking about finding my own place here, maybe asking you for help until I can get back on my feet." Her voice dropped. "He lost it. Said I'd always been ungrateful, just like you. That I was weak for running back to Mommy." She touched her bruised jaw again. "When he threw the glass, Tommy screamed. The look on my son's face, Mom. Pure terror. I knew in that moment we had to leave. "Does Robert know you're here?" She nodded miserably. It was the first place he guessed when he called. He kept calling until I turned off my phone. Anger burned inside me. At Robert for manipulating my daughter, at myself for not seeing it sooner. But now wasn't the time. "You and Tommy can stay as long as you need," I said firmly. "The spare bedroom is ready, and there's a trundle bed for Tommy." Caroline looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "You have a bed for him?" "I've always kept it ready," I admitted. "Just in case." Something in Caroline's expression softened. "You never gave up on us, did you? Even when I pushed you away?" "Never," I said simply. We fell silent, the ticking of the kitchen clock the only sound between us. Outside, the rain had stopped, moonlight breaking through the clouds. "I don't know what happens next," Caroline said finally. "I don't have a job. My credit cards are maxed out. I haven't worked since before Tommy was born." "One step at a time," I advised. "Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we'll figure it out together." For the first time in years, Caroline didn't argue or pull away when I reached for her hand. Her fingers curled around mine, holding on tight. "I've been so angry for so long," she whispered. "I don't know how to stop." "You start by forgiving yourself," I told her gently. "The rest will follow." That night, I helped Caroline settle Tommy in the trundle bed. As we tucked him in, his eyes fluttered open briefly. "Are we staying with Grandma?" he mumbled sleepily. "For a little while," Caroline answered, smoothing his "how 6 months can change everything." The morning sun filtered through lace curtains as I stood in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The sizzle of bacon and the rich aroma of coffee filled the air. From down the hall came Tommy's laughter, followed by Caroline's playful scolding about superhero underwear not being appropriate attire for breakfast. I smiled, stirring pancake batter and listening to the sounds of my home, no longer quiet and empty, but alive with the chaos of family. The first few weeks after Caroline and Tommy arrived had been the hardest. Robert called constantly, vacillating between tearful pleas and vicious threats. He'd shown up at my door twice, once drunk and belligerent enough that we'd called the police. The restraining order came after that. Caroline had been fragile, alternating between fierce determination and paralyzing doubt. Some nights, I'd find her crying silently at the kitchen table, old photographs spread before her. "I don't know who I am anymore," she confessed one evening. "I've spent so long being Robert's wife, Tommy's mother. Before that, I was just your angry daughter. I don't know who Caroline is on her own." It was a journey we took together. Caroline rediscovering herself, me learning to be a mother to an adult daughter with wounds I'd inadvertently helped create. We talked more in those first months than we had in the previous decade. Painful conversations that often ended in tears but slowly cleared away the debris of misunderstandings. Tommy, resilient as only children can be, adjusted more quickly. He delighted in having both his mother and grandmother under one roof, though he sometimes asked about his father with a confusion that broke my heart. "Why was Dad so mad all the time?" he asked Caroline one night as she tucked him in. I'd paused in the hallway, not wanting to intrude but unable to walk away. "Sometimes," Caroline answered carefully, "grown-ups carry hurt inside them for so long that it turns into anger. And sometimes that anger spills onto the people they love. Like how you were angry at Grandma." The question hung in the air. I held my breath. "Yes," Caroline had finally said. "Just like that. But I'm trying to do better now." Change came slowly, then all at once. Caroline found a part-time job at the library, working while Tommy was in school. She filed for divorce, a process that Robert fought bitterly until his parents intervened, convincing him to agree to a settlement. By month 4, Caroline and Tommy had moved into a small apartment a few blocks from me, close enough for daily visits but separate enough for Caroline to build her independent life. I watched with pride as my daughter discovered her own strength, making decisions without seeking anyone's approval. "I'm enrolling in community college," she announced over Sunday dinner. "Just 2 classes to start." I want to finish the degree I abandoned when I married Robert. Tommy had high-fived her across the table. Does this mean I get to help with your homework? Now, as I flipped pancakes and arranged bacon on a platter, I marveled at how full my life had become. I'd gone from seeing my grandson once or twice a year to having him sleep over every Friday night. From stilted phone calls with my daughter to daily texts and coffee dates. Something smells amazing, Caroline said, entering the kitchen with Tommy bouncing behind her, thankfully now dressed in proper clothes. Grandma's special pancakes, Tommy exclaimed, climbing onto his chair at the table. Caroline came to my side, wordlessly taking the spatula from my hand. You've been cooking all morning. I relinquished my post, watching as she competently flipped pancakes with the same concentration she'd shown as a child learning to tie her shoes. My daughter, strong, determined, and healing a little more each day. As we ate breakfast, Tommy regaled us with plans for his upcoming 9th birthday party. And I want a chocolate cake with blue frosting. And a piñata. And can I invite Kevin from my class? His parents are divorced too, so he gets it. Caroline caught my eye over Tommy's head, a smile playing at her lips. The word, divorced, no longer made her flinch as it had in the beginning. After breakfast, as Caroline helped Tommy with a school project, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery man holding a large, flat package. Delivery for Caroline Mitchell, he said, checking his clipboard. I signed for it, puzzled. Caroline hadn't mentioned expecting anything. What is it? Caroline asked, coming to the hallway. When she saw the package, her eyes widened. It's here already. I thought it would take another week. She took the package, an unexpected shyness in her expression. It's for you, Mom. An early birthday present. My birthday wasn't for another 3 weeks. Intrigued, I followed her back to the living room. Can I give it to her? Tommy asked excitedly. Caroline nodded, handing him the package. Careful, it's fragile. Tommy presented it to me with all the ceremony of a royal page. Happy almost birthday, Grandma. I unwrapped it carefully, heart skipping a beat when I recognized what lay inside. A leather-bound album, nearly identical to the one I'd made for Tommy. Open it, Caroline urged softly. The first page held a photo I'd never seen before. Caroline and me at the hospital the day Tommy was born. I was holding the newborn, looking down at him with wonder while Caroline watched from her bed, exhausted but smiling. Robert took this, Caroline explained. I found it when I was going through old memory cards. Each page that followed documented moments I'd missed or forgotten. Caroline and Tommy at the beach building sandcastles. Tommy's first day of kindergarten. Caroline holding up a library employee badge with nervous pride. And then newer photos. The 3 of us at Thanksgiving dinner. Tommy and me making cookies in my kitchen. Caroline receiving her first A on a college assignment. Face glowing with accomplishment. The final page held a handwritten note in Caroline's elegant script. Mom, for years I focused on all the moments we lost. This album is dedicated to the moments we've found and the ones yet to come. Thank you for never giving up on us, even when I'd given up on myself. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand the depth of your love. I'm learning to see our story through new eyes, not as a tragedy of absence, but as a testament to perseverance. I love you. Caroline, tears blurred my vision as I traced the words with trembling fingers. Do you like it, Grandma? Tommy asked anxiously. I love it, I whispered. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Caroline sat beside me, her shoulder touching mine. I thought we could add to it together. Keep making new memories. Later that night, after Caroline and Tommy had gone home to their apartment, I sat alone with both albums. The one I'd made for Tommy and the one Caroline had made for me. Different perspectives of the same shared history. I thought of the past 6 months, of the pain and healing we'd walked through together. Of the moments we'd never get back and the ones waiting just around the corner. My daughter had found her way back to me. Not because I'd forced the journey or demanded recognition for my sacrifices, but because she'd been ready to see our shared past with compassionate eyes. As I closed the albums and prepared for bed, I felt lighter than I had in years. The wounds of the past hadn't disappeared. They had transformed into bridges, connecting us in ways that only shared suffering could. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Robert was petitioning for more visitation rights. Caroline was nervous about her upcoming midterms. Tommy needed new soccer cleats. But tonight, surrounded by photographs of the family we had been, had become, and were still growing into, I knew with bone-deep certainty that we would face it all together. The album of our lives was still being written, one memory at a time.